The existing record office is really full. It's jammed to capacity. I went round 4 or 5 years ago, it was full then, and it's getting fuller. We have over 1 million artefacts from Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland, and they cover every aspect of our life. Our industrial revolution, our social history, land ownership, our family trees, it's all in there. If you want to know anything about Leicestershire and Rutland, you come to the records office. At the moment we have our collection in all sorts of buildings, some of them former industrial buildings, all sorts of buildings where we've temporarily put things in storage. Well, that can't continue, and we're going to bring them all together. So it means actually when you arrive at the front desk there now, in one single place, you'll be able to ask for access to all our collection and be able to, and it's much easier for us to manage and much easier for the general public to find it as well.
So we've got millions of individual items and we have thousands of requests every year to see them, and our social media reach reaches millions of people across the world who are interested in the history of the region.
We must have millions if you count every individual sheet of paper and so on. And here they all are, all sorts of things, really from the 12th century onwards and until today.
We're here at the Collections Resources Centre today, which is where we store some of our museum collections when they're not on display and make them accessible to groups and visitors who want to come and see them here. It's a really varied and rich collection that we use as much as possible in exhibitions, displays and for lending to other groups and organisations.
But this fat book here is one of my favourites. We've got Henry VIII to thank for these items, and they're the parish registers showing the baptisms, marriages and burials throughout the county. This one is for Loughborough, so it's the first register for Loughborough All Saints, and it just simply records people's baptisms, marriages, burials, often very briefly. But there's a particularly exciting item in August 1579 which has been highlighted with a little hand drawn by the vicar, so you know it's exciting. Some of the little hands are not all as fascinating as this one, but this one's exceptionally good, as it refers to Roger Shepherd, who is the son-in-law to Nicholas Wallens, was slain by a lioness. So that's amazing enough that there's a lioness wandering around Loughborough in August 1579, I would say. And it was in his house and it wounded Roger Shepherd. For me, this is so amazing, and just there in a book recording people's perfectly ordinary lives that they couldn't possibly have known that hundreds of years later that they'd be researched and remembered in quite the way they are.
Well, the document I've chosen is a very unprepossessing thing, really. It's a very dull, uncolourful piece, but it actually records the work of the quarter sessions, which was the forerunner of the county council. But the thing that really brings home life to me is this little account here, and this was evidence given in court, and the chairman of the quarter sessions, a chap called Smith, Charles Lorraine Smith, he wrote down what the lady, Mrs. Starmer, said to him, and it's an account of how her husband went to bed one night and he took a knife with him. He'd obviously lost all his senses, and he said, "I'll kill you before morning," and that's the story she tells. But the interesting thing for me is that at the very end she signs it, and you can see she signs it with a cross, and at the bottom she's destroyed the poor man's pen. She's probably never held a pen before in her life, and she's actually split the nib and run out of ink there. So that, to my mind, that brings life in the raw very much to our attention from 1798.
We're full to capacity. We can't just ignore it. It is actually a legal requirement that we have to maintain a fit-for-purpose records office. And that applies to the city and it applies to Rutland as well. And without making a major investment, we can't do that. We can't add more to our collection because we need to save artefacts from today and what's happening in our world today, because the world changes all the time.
My favourite object is probably ladybird books. These were made locally in Loughborough, which is why we have such a lot of ladybird books and things to do with that company. But they're fascinating in terms of reflecting interests about the time, social history and changes, so changes in outfits and fashions, as well as being quite nostalgic. This is, you know, this one, Things to Make, takes us back to a much simpler time before smartphones and tablets, and when you just had to make a colourful whir out of cardboard. the ingenuity of Wills and Hepworth to come up with this simple book design during the Second World War, using one sheet of paper, became this iconic British institution of the Ladybird book, which is much parodied now, but is something that certainly for people of my generation, we all grew up with these and loved them.
The main aim and hope is that more people get to see our collection, more people get to enjoy it, more people get to understand their history, and more people get to really understand what makes Leicestershire so special.